And this is why I think Dillon Brooks is the villain that the NBA needs. Memphis, they never forgot. The NBA has a bunch of villains that have been in the NBA. Whether it's because they're a really good team or player in general, whether it's because they're a dirty player, it seems like each year we have at least one individual that stands out for being a quote-unquote villain. Last year, I would argue the Phoenix Suns were the villains of the NBA, not because they really did anything wrong, they just talk shit and people didn't like it. I mean, of course, there's more context to it, but that is the basis of it. But this year, it seems like we have a new person that is starting to take that role, and he's taking it pretty well. This season, there is probably a name of a role player that you've heard more times than not, and of course I'm talking about Dillon Brooks. It's no secret the Memphis Grizzlies have been a hot team to talk about this year, whether it was Ja saying they're fine in the West, whether it's the fact that they were a really hot team at one point and they were talking and people just did not like it, or whether it's the fact that Ja Morant had yet another incident. There have been a lot of reasons you could talk about the Grizzlies this year, and most of them are not positive, but I would say the most popular player to be talked about this year, not named Ja Morant on this team, has to be Dillon Brooks. It seems like Dillon Brooks has taken the role of being the NBA villain and he's just starting to run with it. But why do people hate him? At one point, Dillon Brooks was a young, solid two-way player for the Grizzlies who was just someone playing his role. Now he's dressing up in these ridiculous outfits, talking disrespect to a lot of legends in the game. Okay, but seriously, what the fuck is this? Now, what I'm about to say might be controversial, but I think Dillon Brooks is exactly what the NBA needs. But before I can explain that, I need to explain to you how we got here, because the writing has been on the wall for years and only now are people finally starting to realize it. I think we really started to see a glimpse of how good Dillon Brooks could be in the NBA, because at Oregon, man, this guy was something else. In his 3 years at Oregon, he'd average about 15 points per game, while also having some pretty impressive honors. He'd be an NCAA All-Region player, he would be on the Pac-12 All-Freshman team, and he'd also win the 2016 to 2017 Pac-12 Player of the Year. And as a huge Arizona State University fan, I had to watch this man dismantle my team every time we would play him, and yeah, he was pretty annoying to play against. Now, as far as antics go, only one thing really did happen. In the NCAA tournament, Dillon Brooks and his Oregon team was playing up against Duke, and there was a time where Dillon Brooks apparently talked shit to Coach K, and Coach K didn't like that. Dillon Brooks after would later say that Coach K said he was a good player and he shouldn't be doing stuff like that, but then Coach K would later deny it. There was a back and forth between the two, but really I don't think it was anything too crazy, but I will say it is definitely foreshadowing. After winning Pac-12 Player of the Year, he would leave to go to the NBA draft, where he would be selected in the second round by the Houston Rockets, but he would get traded to the Memphis Grizzlies on draft night. Now real quick, before we do get to the NBA, I just need to reference a clip I saw because I thought this was so funny, and yes, this is going to make sense later.
Telling them that, I want to be like Draymond Green for this team. I would never think that, I would be in this position now with, everybody here, and, if it's great, and, I can't take it for granted. I got to keep going, and, my team knows that, I know that, so, you got to focus on Oklahoma, and,
In his first couple seasons in the NBA, he was a pretty solid player and already made himself known as a good defensive player that was going to be a starter on this Memphis team. Now mind you, this Memphis Grizzlies team had a lot of potential to do great things. Now despite this team being a rebuilding team at one point, I think they handled the rebuilding process so well. And I won't lie, I think the fact that they got Dillon Brooks in the second round, I mean technically they traded for him, but the fact they got him in the second round was a really good pickup, especially for the fact in just his third season he'd be averaging about 16 points per game. It didn't take long, but this is what we were starting to learn about Dillon Brooks. He was a solid two-way player, he was a good defender, he could score, and most importantly, he was going to be a key part of this team. Now, I can't talk about Dillon Brooks without talking about the biggest rivalry in the NBA right now. And yes, if it was not obvious already, Dillon Brooks was a very big part of this rivalry getting started. A common misconception is that the Warriors and Grizzlies rivalry started because of the play-in tournament, but it actually started even before that. And the key reason why this whole thing even started was because of Andre Iguodala. If we go back to the Golden State Warriors dynasty run, if that's what you want to call it, when they were really doing well, Andre Iguodala was a key part of that. I mean, this is the same guy that somehow won Finals MVP. Yeah, to this day, I still don't understand it. Regardless, if you're a Warriors fan or you're just an NBA fan in general, I think you think of Andre Iguodala as more of a warrior. Now, in the early days of Andre Iguodala's career, he was a solid player for the 76ers, but nowadays, he's more of like a Udonis Haslem. What I mean by that is he's more of a leadership role. He's normally a guy that's just on the bench. He doesn't play that many valuable minutes. And when the Warriors kind of came to this realization, they decided to trade him to the Memphis Grizzlies in a roster-cutting move. Now you might be thinking to yourself, wait, Spex, I don't ever remember Andre Iguodala playing a game for the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, if you tried to look it up, you're probably not going to find it. And that's because he didn't play a single game for this team. So mind you, this would be the bubble season, just to give a little bit of context, you know, around the time that it was. But Andre Iguodala said he wanted to play for a contending team, and he didn't see the vision in Memphis. And the reason why I talk about it was the bubble, because he would get traded to the Miami Heat. And I don't think many people expected the Heat to actually go to the finals. They were definitely contenders in some way. However, before he was traded to Miami, the things that he said about Memphis came out, and Dillon Brooks, he had a response to that.
First time I seen him was on TV talking about us. But we don't, you know, it doesn't even matter. Guy that's on our team doesn't want to be on our team. You know, I can't wait till we find a way to trade him so we can play him. And I could just show him what really Memphis is about.
To give you a little bit of context on how the Grizzlies did that year, they would finish 9th in the Western Conference, but I just want to say this. Number one, this was a very young team. I mean, this was Ja Morant's rookie season. And Jaren Jackson Jr., well, this was just his sophomore year. So when Dillon Brooks said Iguodala did not see the vision, I totally understand. If the Grizzlies were like, let's say, the 13th seed or something, and they were just really bad, I could understand where he's coming from. But I think we all thought that the Grizzlies were just a couple moves away from actually being a really good team. And while hindsight is 2020, we all know how that would end. I thought it was very unprofessional of Andre Iguodala to play like this and just basically force himself out of Memphis. Now, of course, like the beautiful Disney movie it ended, like Andre Iguodala would come back to the Warriors after a couple seasons with Miami, where I feel like he's going to end his amazing career. I mean, this guy's playing very well this year. I mean, 11% from 3. I don't know many guys that can do that. All jokes aside, it is very apparent on why this rivalry got started. So looking at this right now, I'm not really blaming Dillon Brooks. Now, on the surface, it really didn't seem like nothing crazy. In fact, there was love that was being shown between both teams. But here's the thing, Memphis, they never forgot, and we were all about to find out about this team. The following season is where things got interesting. The Grizzlies were once again the 9th seed, and they just didn't figure it out yet, but they felt like they were on the brink of something special. I mean, Ja Morant had a pretty solid year, Jaren Jackson Jr. was finding his way, and Dillon Brooks, of course, he had a pretty solid season. But let's fast forward to the plan. Now, I need to talk about the Warriors at this time. Stephen Curry was arguably going on an MVP run, and some people to this day believe he should have won the MVP because of that run he went on later in the year. Because of that run, he was able to get Golden State into a play-in situation. They lost in the first game versus the Lakers, but they still had one more chance to make the playoffs. If they won the series, they'd be playing against the Utah Jazz, which I argue they probably could have won that series. Now, looking back at this game, I did not think Memphis was going to win it. In fact, I didn't even watch the game. I think everyone just assumed that the Golden State Warriors were going to win. I mean, sure, Memphis seemed like a cool team to play against, but they were not going to beat this team. The Warriors, they were talented, they had experience. Steph Curry was playing like the MVP. There is no way this young team that is unexperienced is going to beat the Warriors in arguably the biggest game of the season. You gotta give the Grizzlies credit for winning this game. This was one hell of a game. Ja Morant did his thing, Dillon Brooks played well, Jaren Jackson Jr., every single person did their thing. And now this got interesting. Andre Iguodala would join the Warriors the following year, but the following year, Memphis and Golden State, they would rematch. But it was in this series where the world would start to hate Dillon Brooks.
Golden State still looking to crack the seal. Payton right down the middle, he's fouled hard.
There is no question about this. This is a dirty play. This was unacceptable, and this should not have happened. Now, after this injury, Steve Kerr would say something that would definitely play a factor.
In the playoffs, you know, this should be the time of his life. And a guy comes in and whacks him across the head in midair. He broke the code. Dillon Brooks broke the code.
Throughout this whole series, there was a bunch of shots being taken, a lot of back and forths are going on. Also, I should mention that Dillon Brooks became arguably the most hated player in California, which if you ask me is totally justified. I'm not gonna lie, there was a chance that the Grizzlies could have beaten the Warriors. Unfortunately, Ja Morant got injured and the what if game could have been played. In my personal opinion, I still believe the Warriors were going to win that series. However, Ja Morant missed most of the series, and I hated how people were looking at the stat of, oh, the Grizzlies are like, I think 18-2 without Ja Morant. Just so you know, that was never going to apply in the actual playoffs where this stuff matters. Like, there were people saying that Ja Morant was a negative to the Grizzlies. It was a whole stupid storyline. In fact, I think some people are still saying this. To no one's surprise, the Grizzlies would lose the series, and Dillon Brooks, I'm not gonna lie, he played terrible as a #1 option. But in his defense, Dillon Brooks has never been a #1 option. I've never seen him in that way, and I don't think he's ever gonna be that guy. But I will say, he's a good role player, but he's just not the main guy, and I think it became became very apparent after this series. And the following year, well, that's where we're at right now. Now, over this season, every time the Grizzlies and the Warriors play, it is a movie. The Warriors and Grizzlies have played 4 times this year, and the record, well, it's actually split. The Warriors took the first 2 dubs where they were definitely talking a lot of shit, and the Grizzlies, they took the last 2 games. And of course, they were talking shit. So despite this being a Dillon Brooks video, you might be asking, why did I recap this entire rivalry? I mean, the amount of events I could have gone over talking about this ejection or this technical foul, I definitely could have done that. But if we did that, it would be a 44-minute video. In fact, there's already a video out. Regardless, I felt like I needed to explain this part because this was one of the biggest reasons why Dillon Brooks is seen as this big villain. That series is what really made Dillon Brooks the most hated player in the NBA. After that, we just started to pay attention to him a lot more. I mean, do you guys realize that this season he has 18 techs? I don't think it's a surprise that it's this season he's doing it. It seems like now Dillon Brooks is finally starting to embrace this villain role, and this all started in that Warriors series. But the Golden State Warriors, they're a pretty classy team. They don't usually get in trash talk. So why is it this one team they're going back and forth with? And I know there's probably going to be a couple shit talkers in the comment section like, oh, well, this happened and that happened. I know there's probably been a couple examples, but it has never been to the degree of this. Whether you like Dillon Brooks or not, there is one thing you can respect about him. There's an old famous quote by Michael Jordan that goes as follows.
Well, that's all right. Let's see if all that trash talking starts when it's 0-0 instead of 5-6 point lead. That's where it starts. That's the sign of a good man. If you can talk shit when it's even score, or talk shit when you're behind score. When you're ahead, it's easy to talk.
Whether you like him or not, Dillon Brooks has always kept that same energy. He is always talking shit no matter the situation. And I think what Dillon Brooks represents is what the NBA is afraid of. The Warriors dynasty, yeah, that's coming to a close. And when Draymond Green went on that podcast rant about Dillon Brooks, and when I thought was basically an evisceration of him.
This idiot said, I don't know what Draymond does out there. Matter of fact, let me run this back. He said, I don't like Draymond at all. You don't know me. I just don't like Golden State. Quite frankly, wouldn't like a team that beats me all the time either. I don't like anything to do with them. Quite frankly, you were a little kid in high school watching us win championships. Should be happy that you even witnessed that, or maybe college, but you get the point. You're a fan. Draymond talks a lot. You talk a lot now, so if you have 4 rings, sure, you talk a lot more. For All-Stars, you probably talk a bit more. Defensive Player of the Year, you for damn sure would talk more. 2 Olympic gold medals, you definitely would be talking, because that would mean you beat Team USA, and we all know how that goes.
Oh, wow. I'm low-key salty at that one.
Gets away with a lot, too. What exactly do I get away with? I have 15 texts, 1 less than your dumb ass. His game is cool. They're actually depending on this guy to help them win a championship. And he says his game is cool. Quite frankly, that just shows how little you know about basketball.
He couldn't back it up. Dillon Brooks punked the Warriors. I gotta say, he punked them. Mind you, this team did not have Ja Morant as that whole entire thing was going on. Dillon Brooks by himself was the reason they won that game. Now, granted, I don't think in the playoffs that Dillon Brooks is gonna be a #1 option. I said that earlier, but he played well in this game as a #1 option. And I think that's why Golden State is so mad. They're starting to realize this dynasty that they used to have, it's getting old. And it's becoming very apparent when you see Klay Thompson on the bench showing that he has 4 rings. Klay Thompson is a great player, and I'm not going to take that away from him. But this thing of getting blown out or getting outmatched and you just start showing that you have 4 rings is real fucking annoying. Now, I say this all to say that Dillon Brooks, he's just showing everyone that he doesn't care and that he's a villain in this league. He's outright said he's willing to embrace that role, and I think he's playing it very well. So I say all of that to say, I think the NBA needs a villain. They need someone that is not afraid to talk shit, whether they're down or they're up. The NBA needs a guy that's a pretty good player. I'm not gonna lie, you may not like Dillon Brooks, but he's a good player. Now, of course, I don't like the fact that he's a dirty player. I think he does a lot of things that could injure people. I mean, for example, basically getting rid of Donovan Mitchell's chances to have kids. But all of the dirty shit aside, the trash talking, the going at players, like this man has literally gone after Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, the whole Warriors at this point. Dillon Brooks has not backed down from any player in the NBA, and you have to respect that. And this is why I think Dillon Brooks is the villain that the NBA needs. Whether you like it or not, we need someone that's toxic. We need a great player who's on a great team, who is not afraid to go at anyone. And Dillon Brooks, I think he's that guy. And if he keeps doing what he's doing, he's going to be continued to be the most hated man in the NBA. And at this point, I'll be here for it. And I'll be alongside every other person that hates this man. But truth be told, we need this. We absolutely need this.